Jade Green, A Ghost Story by Phyllis Reynolds Naylor. When the carriage turned onto Stone Street, it was as though the house were watching. There were 2 gables with a window in each, the curtains slightly parted like cat's eyes, not quite closed, spying. Earlier that day, I had arrived by train in Charleston, and had at once been restless to move about after the tiresome journey from Ohio. Indeed, I felt constrained in my long gray skirt and jacket, a bonnet of gray and blue on my head. I was hungry as well, for in the first few hours I had eaten all the bread and cheese I had packed for the trip. Even more, I had longed for someone to talk to. As I have an adventurous spirit, I asked the driver who met me at the station if I could sit up front with him rather than in the carriage. There was a still considerable way to go before we reached the town of Whispers. "An odd name for a town," I said to the man, a good-hearted soul with a red face and large ears, who helped me onto the driver's bench, where there was a much better view than any you could have had within the carriage. "They say it was named for the trees, Miss Sparrow," he answered, hauling himself up beside me with many a grunt and wheeze. "It's the sound they make when the wind blows through 'em. Like old ladies they are, always whispering." And then, with a final look around to see what little I had owned in this world was secured to the rack, he gave a soft "gee up," and the horse began its 2-hour journey to the place where I would spend the rest of my life. God willing. I was much gratified when the man drew from his coat pocket a cinnamon bun, and I accepted it eagerly. "You coming to help the cook, eh?" he asked, leaning forward so that his elbows rested on his knees. All the better to stand the long ride, I suppose. "Yes, sir, and it's a good thing they'd have me, for not one other relative would take me in." "You're an orphan, then?" I nodded. "My father died 4 years ago September, and my mother died last month." I did not tell him that after my father's death, my mother gave birth to a stillborn daughter, all of which grieved her so that she eventually died in a madhouse. "But now, I will live in South Carolina and be cousin and housekeeper both. Tell me about the house," I said more brightly. "Ah, miss, that old place is—" He paused. "Haunted?" I teased. "It could use some cheer, and your uncle will be pleased to have you," the driver said quickly. "I don't know about that," I told him. "It wasn't right away he agreed to take me in, and then only because there was no one else." The driver gave me as kind a smile as I'd ever seen. "He'll take one look at you and be glad he let you come," he said. "And my cousin? It will be wonderful having a friend my own age to talk with." "Why, Master Charles is old enough to be your father. Nearly 40, I expect." 40? Surely not, I cried in dismay. "That he is, miss. And you don't live with his father, neither. Take some rooms in town, I believe. No birds of a feather, them two." I slumped back against the seat, too disappointed to say more. How could it be that I was 15 and Charles so old? True, I had never laid eyes on him, except when I was so small I could not remember, living far from the home of my southern relatives. But the more I thought about it, I realized that Uncle Jeffrey was 12 years my father's senior, and while he and his wife may have had their child early, my parents had me late. "Well, never mind," I said at last, finishing off the cinnamon bun. "I shall make them glad I've come and do my best." "Of course you will," he said the driver, and we passed the rest of the time discussing the climate, which, he said, I would find different from Ohio. The storms off the Carolina coast were legendary, he told me, but Emma Hastings, the cook, would make up for it, for she had a heart as warm as an oven and as big as the moon. "Do you play the piano, miss?" he asked. "They've a grand piano in the parlor." "A little," I told him. Indeed, I had only 8 years' schooling, which was quite enough, it was decided, for a girl of my station, though less than some of the boys I knew had acquired. But I could play the piano well enough to amuse myself and, at times, entertain others as well. There was a carriage robe under the seat, and I wrapped it around me as we rode. I had hoped, when the train first arrived in Charleston, to find flowers near bloom, but had been disappointed that spring had not yet come to this part of the country. The tips of the trees were a soft pink, but the land along the road to Whispers had a chilled gray look. It was when we turned up Stone Street that I felt the first foreboding. The bare branches of the trees that lined our path seemed like slender fingers reaching out to ensnare me, and the trees themselves did not whisper, so much as scrape and scratch as the carriage went by. Then, at the end of the street, the house, the large brown house with the 2 eyes, made me suddenly clutch at the driver's arm, as if to say, "Turn back. Please turn back." "It's all right, miss," the driver said. "It's a big, dark house, but Emma Hastings is a good sort. She'll look after you." The long journey from Ohio had unnerved me, I decided. For here I had a home, at least, and a 40-year-old cousin was better than no cousin at all. I had already been told that Uncle Jeffrey spoke little, so I did not expect encouragement or conversation there, but I resolved to be cheerful and obedient nonetheless. Obedient, except in one small thing, and my heart began to race as I remembered my obstinance. The solicitor had told me that there was a certain condition to living in my uncle's house. I could bring along whatever I liked, except anything of the color green. This was strictly forbidden. Such a strange demand, I thought. I had a green dress and some trinkets I would have to leave behind, yet for the offer of a roof over my head, I agreed to the terms. As I packed for the journey, however, I decided that, promise or no, there was one thing I would not, could not, leave behind. A photograph of my mother, which she had given to me in a frame of green silk. How I dared to disobey a man I had not even met, save when I was small, the only person who would give me shelter, now seemed a frightening thing indeed. And yet I yearned so for my mother that I had placed the photograph and frame at the bottom of my trunk, beneath my summer clothes, and there it rested as we neared my uncle's. Thus obedient to all his wishes but one, I alighted from the carriage, my eyes on the house, and opened the iron gate.